Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh and so excited to be here with you this morning.
So nice to be back.
I am thrilled that you're here. I miss you when you're not here because you're a light in my life and in so many other people's lives.
Thank you so much.
And you shed light on things. You're
Thank
like
you.
the lighthouse. That's what I'm going to think of you from now on. But for those of you who are just joining us and have never and we have a lot of new viewers recently.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a true expert in the field of autism. I believe the preeminent expert in the field of autism. She's been in this field for way many more years than she should admit to. What crazy number is it now?
40, yeah. I mean,
40.
I started in 78. It's crazy how fast 40 years goes by, you know?
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, man, don't I know that. Because doesn't it feel like if you're talking about something that happened 40 years ago, it should be something your grandmother knows about and you weren't here for? But to have adult memories.
I was like, even at UCLA 40 years ago, it's pretty crazy.
That's
yeah.
insane. I can always remember my grandmother saying, a doctor would come into the room with her and she would say, I have dresses older than you.
Yeah.
And I would think, that's a crazy, weird thing to say.
It's
and
true.
now I have
It's
dresses
true. It's
older than
true.
some of our viewers.
Honestly.
So there we are. But Dr. Granpeesheh, in that 40-year time span, has been treating individuals on the autism spectrum from very young babies up through adults and senior citizens. She has been a champion for individuals on the spectrum, having them be treated as whole individuals. And get all the things that they should be afforded to be able to lead the full and productive lives that they choose to lead.
Absolutely.
She has been somebody who has championed the families and and called out the difficult things that families have to overcome,
Right.
and been a visionary for seeing down the road how insurance would come into play.
Never thought that would happen, but it's beautiful to live through that.
Well,
yeah.
and and I continue to applaud the fact that in all of that, you keep asking the important questions about what is the best for this individual.
Absolutely,
Not
yeah.
just the community, but
Absolutely.
the individual, and what does this family need to make that happen and to support them. And I just want to thank you on behalf of all those people for being that person.
Thank you very much, Shannon, and thank you very much for helping us continue that tradition, I guess, or that perspective throughout CARD.
Well,
as well.
Heaven knows I enjoy the opportunity
Thank you.
that CARD affords me to do that on a regular basis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, Mutual Admiration Society aside, Dr. Granpeesheh likes to come here whenever she can and spend an hour answering questions that you guys have written in. We do need to give the disclaimer at the start of this that there is no individual in any format, in any expertise who can give individual specific advice in this particular forum because they don't have an opportunity to meet the individual, observe them, so on and so forth. So
Right.
having said that, Dr. Granpeesheh is going to answer questions in a general nature, giving you information that she is aware of from her 40 years in this field, and hopefully that will help you to make decisions in which path you go down next, and really to help you that when you are sitting with the expert that is in your life, that you will get to the information you need
Ask the
quicker.
right questions, that's right.
Yes, because I firmly believe that knowing what question to ask is often the main thing that achieves success.
That's a good point. That's a good
You know, for the families watching, and when it's not your question being asked, sometimes you learn more from somebody else's question because you go, I didn't even know that was a question. I don't even know what that question means.
True.
Because you haven't seen it yet or you didn't know about it. So in any case, that's the disclaimer. So I'm going to jump right in here. We had a question that came in this morning. This individual writes in and says, my daughter is 5 years old, nonverbal. We are doing ABA for the past 2 years. She uses Prolo, Quo, 2, Go. My question is how to teach her reading. Do you have any method or curriculum to follow? I have heard EdMark curriculum is good for ASD kid, but how reading works for a nonverbal child, please help.
Yeah, so Edmark is terrific. It's a good program, but this is a pretty complicated question. So, you generally are, there's too many steps for me to try to give you a single reading program. It's, I think, important to, maybe the best place to start for you would be to go to skills, actually, because we do break it down and we start with, the child might actually not even recognize letters, not be able to enunciate the sounds of letters. I don't know. And then there are, of course, children who are extremely good at that. And so they're already teaching themselves to read. So I don't know, given your child's background or skills, where your child would be entering a reading program. So my recommendation is to go into skills. There's a whole section in our academic curriculum on reading. And basically the process is some of the kids will learn a lot faster just going on sight reading, and then they develop the phonetics and so on, and other children learn the typical way of going letter by letter, phonetics, and then establishing a connection between words and objects, and then starting to read that way. The important thing, I think, so go on skills, first of all.
We don't have my
Yes,
tent. I got to ask
yes.
Eliana for a new tent. But can we just stop for a second and say what skills is?
Yes,
Skills
yes.
is an amazing tool.
Absolutely. Skills is I don't even know what to call skills. It's a program, it's a platform that we developed. It's an online platform that we developed over the course of the past 20 years. And maybe even longer. And what it started out as was many, many years ago, I decided that it would be important for me to write down all the lessons that we teach our children, everything that we teach. So not the procedures, but the content. So for instance, how do I teach a child, what is the content of teaching a child to speak? To communicate their needs, to play with other children, to pay attention, to do what they're expected to do in class, to socialize with other kids, you name it. And so we started writing out all these lessons, and then we realized that the lessons fall under different categories. So we started to categorize them, and the categories ended up being language, play, social behavior, cognitive behavior, executive functions, adaptive skills, academic skills, and motor skills, 8 specific areas. And once we classified them that way, we then went ahead and decided to look at developmental goals and tests, and also IQ tests, and all kinds of measures that help us identify exactly what a child should be doing at every age. So at the age of 1, you're supposed to have the following skills, at 2, the following skills, and so on and so forth. And so we added to our curriculum, and it turned into a pretty intensive and massive curriculum. And specifically below the age of 8, it ended up being roughly 4,500 lessons. And then we said, okay, these lessons, so let's say one lesson would be identifying objects, right? And so if you can imagine, there's thousands and thousands of objects. And so then we went in and detailed each lesson and said, okay, these are called operants or exemplars, and we basically listed all the different exemplars that you can teach. Colors would be, red, green, blue, yellow, etc. Objects would be every object, name, and so on. And so it became this massive platform. By the time we finished writing it, technology had advanced to the point where we could put this online. We put it online, and then I became a little concerned because I thought every parent or teacher will now think they have to teach everything. You remember that phase where I was like, okay, this is like way too much, and every parent is now going to try to teach their child 4,500 lessons, which is not what I want to do, right? So then we spent another few years developing an assessment tool, which was a lot of work. And that assessment tool was basically a series of questions. And the questions you would ask the parent of a child: does your child know how to identify pen? Does your child know the colors, et cetera, et cetera? And the parent would say yes or no, and anything they said yes would go into sort of a pool of skills that the child already has. Anything they said no to would link to a lesson. And by doing this, we were able to, and then we validated that assessment tool. And then, so by doing this, we were able to produce a really accurate profile of the child. And these are all the things the child needs to catch up on.
Yeah.
So skills then became these two components, which one was the assessment of the child, and the second one was the curriculum that's appropriate for the child. And then we said, okay, well, we now need to measure how the child, of course, in the meantime, we developed a whole different thing called IBT, which is the Institute for Behavior Training, which is the techniques. Because once I put skills out, I realized that parents are not going to know how to teach this stuff, so we need the techniques. That became a whole different platform called Institute for Behavior Training, which you can access as well, and has training for how to teach things using ABA. But in the meantime, we then decided skills needs to also be able to track a child's progress. So we then developed some platforms that are on the iPad for tracking or inputting data, so that when I teach a child the colors, let's say, I'm able to track that he's mastered yellow, he's mastered blue, he's mastered red, et cetera, et cetera. And so now skills also provides these like a very nice summary of the data, and also lots of graphs showing the child's rate of acquisition. So how fast is the child learning? And then I won't bore you with all the details after that, but now the whole value of skills has now for me become the data that we collect, because we have tens of thousands of kids putting data on skills all the time, and now we're able to capture things about autism that nobody else can. So like how fast kids learn who are on a specific medication, what subtypes of autism there are, et cetera, et cetera. Now, right now, what I'm suggesting to this particular viewer is that you should go on skills. In fact, I recommend to every viewer that you should do the assessment on skills, because it really helps identify where you need to focus. You know, most of our kids are very young when they're starting, and we only have a few years. Like this child is 5 years old, and he's already been, or she's already been in ABA for 2 years. So it's important to focus on the things that are the most important, so that you're not wasting a whole lot of time. You know, none of our kids can afford the time. So going on skills, answering the assessment questions helps you focus. Secondly, though, for parents who really just want to kind of learn about one thing or another, like reading, if you go on skills and you access the academic curriculum, you will see a section for reading, and you'll see a whole bunch of direction on, you know, specific sub-skills. Each of these lessons are broken down immensely, so it'll give you more detail than you ever hoped for, and it will help you identify exactly how you will teach your child a reading program, because it differs based on where your child enters.
Can I pause and just
answer.
well, but can I consolidate that down, because you know me, I'm always
Yes,
the, like
please,
let me
please do.
translate. And so what I want you to think of for skills, and Traven, somewhere you have the skills address. It's skillsforautism.com, and you probably even have the phone number in the TriCaster there. But skills, picture a toolkit. That's what skills is. It's a toolkit. So you open up the toolkit, a toolkit for autism, and there are many tools in the toolkit. When you open up a toolkit, you don't attempt to use all the tools at the same time.
Right.
You pull one tool out because it's the tool that you need. You say, what I need to do right now is X. So this is a whole toolkit. And if you need to know lessons to teach your child, lessons are in there. If you need to know where to start, there's a way to assess, to see, you answer questions, and it tells you you can start here, here, or here, and you can choose, right? If your child is having behaviors and you don't know what to do about it, there's a tool for that. If you want to go to your IEP and you want to be able to tell them, these are the lessons that are appropriate for my child that they should be working on, there's a tool for that. It's full of tools. So there's something for everybody in it, and it really is meant for absolutely anybody to be able to use it. You can use it
Right,
high level
right.
or use it if you barely know anything. So if you are an ABA practitioner and you have your own business and you want to streamline how you do things and make sure that you're doing them as science-based as possible, Skills is a great toolkit for you, and you can use it high level to treat your kids and track their progress. If you are a parent who just needs to know, where is my kid? And you can't get a professional to tell you. I always say, like, the mall has a map that says you are here, right? So that you can gauge, where do I need to get from. Skills is the only thing that I am aware of that gives a parent the opportunity to be able to do that on their own time. And the investment of doing the assessment where you answer questions about your kid, I can tell you that, like, it is an investment in time. It takes you a while to do it, but knowing where your kid is so that you can talk to your ABA team, you can talk to your in-laws, and you can talk to the school about, here's where we are and here's where we're trying to get. Oh, I can hear the angels sing. In any case, so skillsforautism.com, toolkit for autism. That's my short version of all the amazing things you just said.
Thank you. Thanks for summarizing that. I needed that.
In any case, so hopefully but there are all kinds of lessons for this mom about reading, but about everything. The problem that parents have is we go, well, I want to teach reading, so we start with reading.
Right.
And we don't know what the prerequisites are. When you go to college and you go, there's the class that I want to take, and it says prerequisites, this, and this. You cannot take this class until you have taken these other classes. That's what Skills does for you with autism.
Exactly.
You go, I want to teach reading, here are the prerequisites for reading.
Exactly.
Because before they can read, they have to be able to sit and attend.
That's right.
They have to have a certain amount of attention to be able to do it, and then you go to that lesson.
And they have to know, letters and sounds and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the one thing I wanted to say before I forget about reading is, once you've gotten into reading and your child, I see that your child is nonverbal, you mentioned, and that means that you are trying to teach reading perhaps for the purposes of communication, which is really important. And there's also sections about that, so nonverbal communication on Skills. But the thing I wanted to say is that reading, in the sense that we read, so the way that, it's going to be two different things for your child. So using letters to communicate is not necessarily going to equate to the ability to read. For some of our kids, they use letters to communicate on Proloquo, for instance, or on any other program, or they keyboard, right? Keyboarding and expressing yourself using letters is a very different skill than reading. And reading, I find often with our kids, even if a child can read, they have a different level of difficulty in terms of reading comprehension, which is a different skill altogether. So separate all of these. Don't expect your child, just because they learn a few letters, to read and comprehend and all these others, and use letters to communicate. If your focus is to using letters to communicate, focus on that. And that's a whole different section called keyboarding.
Okay, so that's a lot to throw at you all at once, but want to remind folks, go to skillsforautism.com, the number 4 autism.com, to find out more information about doing Skills. There's a 14-day free trial that you can sign up for and try it out, and then call your friends over at Skills when you're ready to purchase it full-time, and tell them that you want the Friends and Family Plan from Shannon. There's a discount that you get from having watched it autism-live, so make sure you get that, and let them know where you heard about it, right? That's how you get that discount. So in any case, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back to answer more of your questions. Before we go to break, I just want to say that Chris is watching, and she's getting ready to start with Skills. They're starting ABA, and she's got an orientation set to go. But Chris, you get to have an orientation with me too now. So let's plan on that when that gets to happen. And then Rosie said hello too as well, and we've got more of you that we'll get to in a little while, but we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more of your questions after these messages. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she's answering your questions in real time. So we have another question that came in. I have a 3-year-old boy who has just been diagnosed with autism. He's very hyper. Is there anything I can do to help him to decrease this down?
Well, I mean, it's hard. That's another one of those where I have to kind of exercise some caution in my response because it's when we say someone is hyper, it's a subjective type
Yeah.
of thing. So there's levels of hyperactivity, first of all. So what you could be describing as hyper to me might not even be really, I mean, I have parents coming in where they're like, I swear my child should get a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I will sit and do a full diagnostic, and they don't qualify at all. I mean, and then there are children where the parent comes in and says, I don't know what's wrong, help me, and the child clicks every single box in the ADHD category, right? So I can't really, I don't know what it means when a parent says he is hyper. But assuming that what you're noticing is just that the child has a higher activity level than most other children around him, I would suggest that a couple of different things. One is I would really suggest you see a psychologist who can help, first of all, rule out or diagnose ADHD. Right? So let's figure out if your child actually has hyperactivity disorder, right? In which case, the treatments of choice are medication plus therapy. And that is important to note because there are some cases, and I've met a few kids like this, where the hyperactivity level is so high that there's no point in even trying to sit the child down and teach them something. And as a result, the child falls behind. There's absolutely nothing else wrong with the child's ability to learn, but they're on a completely different speed. And so it just becomes very, very hard for the child to learn anything because the world is just too slow. I mean, imagine, I always tell people, you know, I try very hard to understand what are my kids, no matter what their diagnosis, what they're going through. And if you could just, as an example, just for 1 hour, not even for 1 hour, for 15 minutes, just run. Don't ever walk, don't stop. Just run and see what you receive from your environment if you're running, right? If your physical speed is higher, what are you receiving? And it's a very different thing than if you are sitting, standing, paying attention, etc. And so a lot of kids do fall behind because they are physically hyperactive, and so it becomes very important to slow them down with medication. And then when they're slowed down, you start to teach the child techniques and so on to self-regulate and to keep themselves kind of regulated. So that is one thing. The other thing is if the child, then there's on the other side of the spectrum of hyperactivity, you also could have children who are affected by various things that just make them slightly hyper. For instance, the foods they eat. A lot of kids are hyper when they have taken in sugar. A lot of kids are hyper when they're eating something that they really can't digest or they're allergic to. A lot of kids react to food coloring. There's
pesticides.
There's a lot of stuff that kids react to. So I would really suggest that you get a clear understanding of what the child is able to digest, if they have any allergies, and definitely keep away from the usual culprits, which are sugar and, of course, red food coloring. Those are the two main that pretty much everybody reacts to. Of course, anything that's caffeinated, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another thing to look at. Another area to look at is the child's sleep. Is the child getting enough sleep? When children don't get sleep, instead of getting tired right off the bat, they first become pretty hyper. The other thing is to look at stimuli in the environment, like some of our kids react to certain lights, certain sounds. Environments that are chaotic can make a child hyper. There's a lot of things to analyze there. And so I think the first step for you is to, just like we do with everything else in behavior analysis, figure out the function. What's causing the hyperactivity? Is it a chemical imbalance? Is it a reaction to a dietary factor? Is it a sleep related? Is it environmental? once you've determined that, it helps you figure out what to do next.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate on the pesticides that there have been some pretty important research studies that
yes.
show
Oh, yes.
that even a small amount of pesticide can correlates directly to hyperactivity behaviors.
Yes.
So, and when you take the pesticides out, there's a bit of a detox period, but a lot of parents swear by this now.
That's right. That's right.
So, and I know people go, oh, organic, that's a whole other thing, and I can't afford it, and all these other things. But we talk about on the show a lot, the Environmental Working Group has yearly, they put out a list that's called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And even if there's only just one thing that you do this year, do yourselves, your family, and your child, all your children a favor, and look at what the Dirty Dozen is. It's 12 things that are known offenders for
perfect.
pesticides, and just decide that you are only going to eat those organic, even in a restaurant.
Yep.
I mean, I can feel the difference. Like peppers, I love peppers, and they're almost always on the list. And if I go to a restaurant and eat peppers and they're not organic, I feel different the next day. So I'm telling you, take a look at the Dirty Dozen. It changes every year because farming changes and,
Wow.
and the economy changes, but they test everything. So take those things out and note if it makes a difference, because there are many studies now showing the link between those two things. So
Amazing.
I know, right?
I didn't even know this. I'm definitely going to look this up. I'm
Well,
very happy to hear about it.
Can I tell you who turned me on to that was Rob
Yeah.
Pontello. I was
Really?
not somebody who, the first study was in 2011 that showed this correlation.
Amazing.
And I said, why is this? And because, I like to look at word origins. And when you see
Yep.
pesticide, then you think, well, it kills the bugs. So why would it hurt us? It kills bugs, right? But it doesn't. That is a misnomer. It was named pesticide so that we would think it killed bugs. But pesticide does not kill bugs. It's a neurotransmitter disruptor. That's what it does. And so what it does to bugs, when you put pesticide out and the bugs eat it, the very first thing that it does to them is that it causes the mechanisms in their neurotransmitters to make their legs move fast.
Wow.
Really, really fast, to the point where they are so distracted that they cannot eat. And then eventually, if you give them enough pesticide, it locks up, that you can't move fast enough, so it locks up and they're paralyzed, and then they can't eat and they die of starvation.
That is unbelievable.
That is the truth.
That's amazing information. I'm so glad you told me this.
Organophosphates, which is most of what is in pesticides, is. And so this study, when it shows that in kids, even a small amount of
Yep.
pesticide, if you think about their little body, and it's a neurotransmitter disruptor, and that it causes them to move extra fast, you go, wait a second, what am I putting into my child?
That's amazing.
Right? Changed my life when I was like, okay, didn't know that. But it was Rob Pontello who brought that to my attention.
Amazing.
So, yes. In any case, thank you, Rob, for that. All right, so there we have it. And let's take a break and then come back with the next question. Stick with us, you guys. I'm saying hi to Faith and to Ezra and to Sharon. Thank you so much for joining us. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. She's answering your questions in real time. Our next question comes to us from India. My son is 2.5 years now, and I found a system of autism. We are from Hyderabad. Hyderabad. Thank you.
Hyderabad.
Boy, I saw that totally different than how it's spelled, didn't it? And
Hyderabad. See,
Hyderabad.
Abad means like civilization, or
Oh.
Yeah. So,
So it's
Hyderabad is a city.
Okay, fabulous. We are very much worried about my child, please. I think they're
Yeah.
saying they're trying to find a system for
Right,
autism and
right.
haven't found one, but
Right.
they're worried about their child. So that's a wide open question, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Well, so you are exactly the parent for whom I developed skills and IBT. So what I recommend for you is to get on the Institute for Behavior Training on their website, and it is ibehavioraltraining.com. The letter I, behavioraltraining.com, and I would really recommend you start there. Just go through the modules one by one if you can. Go in the parent section, learn about autism, learn about ABA, educate yourself on techniques, and then go on Skills, which is skillsforautism.com, and there you can start answering questions about your child. Your child's only 2.5, so you're in great shape. Don't worry, you're in the right place. You'll learn the techniques, you will learn what your child needs to learn. And then what you'll do is what a lot of parents used to do years ago in the US, so it's very doable. You will hire people or get family members or anyone from the town to come and help. And each of those people will work maybe 4 hours, 6 hours a week with your child. So that together it adds up to about 40 hours. So it's like when your child is 2.5, you'll do, for instance, let's say you take a few months to learn these things and you get something going, and by the time you get something going, your child's closer to 3. But essentially what you'll do is you'll have different people coming in. So you'll have one session with your child from, let's say, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that'll be one person. And then you'll have another person who comes and does Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and you'll have the next, then your child gets a break at 10 o'clock for, let's say, half an hour. And then you'll have another person going from, let's say, 10:30 until 12:30 or 12. And so you'll break up your child's session a week so that all of his awake hours, someone is with him, and that someone should be trained using all of the IBT training. There's a section for parents on IBT, and there's also a section for paraprofessionals, therapists. So get all these people together and start having them learn from IBT. This is a very inexpensive way to do it. It's like taking classes to learn how to do ABA. Once you've learned that, and once you've answered all the questions on skills, then you have an idea of how to teach and what to teach. Now, we also can help you if you call CARD. We can help assign someone who can do online or by phone or by Zoom or some other, FaceTime. They can give you advice and supervision, and they can guide you how to do this. And you can definitely do this, and we're happy to help you with this. So please don't give up on this. Don't be scared. I know it's a lot scarier. There's actually a lot of families in India who are on Skills and working. I wish there was a way we could connect all of the families together.
We've connected a couple, and if they give permission, we can.
Yeah.
If you write to me, and you can email me at s.penrod@autism-live.com, and you say to me, here's my information, and you have my permission to give my information to other parents that you are aware of, then I can do that. Otherwise, I can't, because your information is very private, and you are entitled to it. So that's up to you, but then we can attempt to, because that's how a group of people gets together, and then you can train somebody together and share.
You can share the therapists, exactly, and that's where it's very beneficial.
Absolutely. We have another question that came in from India, but we're running out of time here, so I'm prioritizing. Let's go ahead and do the India one.
Sure.
So, hello, Dr. Doreen and Mrs. Shannon. I love being called Mrs. Shannon. It's one of my favorite things. This is from India. I have a 9-year-old with PDD-NOS in mainstream 2nd grade. She's always had some smell-related behavior, used to smell non-food objects, smelling her clothes, body parts. Occasionally she tries to hug and smell me. Recently she started to do it to other women, especially in elevators when someone comes very close to her, also trying to touch them. My question is, how does one redirect inappropriate smelling, touching others? I always get the most amazing advice from you. Thank you so much.
So, like everything else, we don't really know what part of her brain is making her smell things, but clearly we receive input from our senses, and sometimes when our kids have they're not receiving enough input from visual, let's say, or auditory, then they use their other senses more, right? So they might use touch or smell or taste even. A lot of children will put things, even babies, all babies essentially will put something in their mouth to figure out what it is, just because those particular sensory receptors are more developed. And so for your child, smell seems to be a way that she is receiving input. So we already know that that's something that's going to be pretty hard to block all the time, except if you give her an appropriate period of time during the day, let's say, where she is allowed to sense various things through smell. So, for instance, have a variety of things that she is allowed to smell. I know people who, I used to have a friend, it's funny, I just remembered this. I used to have a friend who would always put perfume here. And during the course of the day, like when she was just thinking, she'd be like, and she was like, smell something. Or you could always like put a scarf around the individual and put some perfume on it or something like that, so that her sense of smell is being satisfied, let's put it that way. And then it becomes a little bit easier to block those situations that feel inappropriate to you, like going up to people. I mean, like anything else, when a child does something that socially is inappropriate, you just have to not allow it. It's very simple. But again, the theory is you don't allow that, but you try to replace it with some activity that will give the child the same level of sensory satisfaction, stimulation, etc.
Okay, so great advice. We're going to take another short break, and then we're going to be back with, hopefully with one more question. So stick with us. Short break. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh for Ask Dr. Doreen. We're running out of time, but there was one that you had said that there is a book, so I want to address it.
Right.
My name is Richard, and at age 4, I got lead poison. Then at 18, I got diagnosed with autism. My IQ is 109. I'm very smart, and I don't think I have autism. What can it be?
Right. So many years ago, a parent wrote a book called, I believe it was called Turning Lead into Gold. And it had to do with, she had 2 children who had lead poisoning, and they had the exact symptoms of autism. That's why I know about it, because I actually wrote on the back of the book, right? Okay. So I would suggest you try to read that book. It's old, but it is interesting because she would be one of the very first parents I know who started a detox regimen for her children, and that significantly helped. Now, so in terms of where to go for severe lead detoxification, I would recommend that you look up MAPS, which I don't know what MAPS stands for, but
it's actually MedMaps.
MedMaps, okay.
Yes. And it's like medical autism practitioner specialists, I think.
Yeah,
it's
or
somewhere in the
pediatrics.
neighborhood.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So MedMaps, and these are the physicians that focus on autism, but don't let that bug you, because they focus, some of these physicians are very involved with detoxification, which is essentially chelation. And you want to make sure you find someone who's an expert, because chelation is also kind of a dangerous process. But, you know, and there's a lot of controversy about chelation for autism, but there's no controversy regarding chelation and detoxification when it's lead poisoning. So you want to make sure that you look into this, and it's never too late. You would be amazed. In fact, I think for all of us, we're exposed to so many toxins. Chelation is never a bad idea. Personally.
There you go. Okay, this is a very interesting question. I'm a BCBA and would like to train at CARD.
Oh, okay.
Are there any training opportunities for independent providers? And then they gave their email. But you know, CARD is always looking for BCBAs.
Yes, we are. We don't train independent people.
Exactly.
We just don't have time.
Right.
We're training, we're hiring, I don't even know, like over 100 something BCBAs a year. So we're really rapidly recruiting BCBAs. So if you would like to work at CARD, we would love to hire you, train you. Even if you're in a region where we're not, we often hire BCBAs, and then we help you travel to our sites and or do telehealth for us. So we're very involved with our BCBAs. But if you don't want to join CARD, then I would suggest you go to Institute for Behavior Training, ibehavioraltraining.com, and you'll see a lot of training materials there for BCBAs.
Okay, and then I think this is probably going to be our last question. How would I teach my 10-year-old son to do his homework on his own? Currently, he only does it if I am sitting with him, sending that mom a hug.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right.
So you're going to need to set up a token system for your child, and I don't know if your child has the ability to understand a token system, but again, there's a section on token economies, both on skills and on IBT. Token economies are a system where you are rewarding the child for doing something. For instance, the child will, what you'll do is you'll do a homework right now, real quick, just to give you an idea. So you're doing homework, you're sitting with your child, he completes a particular homework item, and normally you just reward him and so on. What you'll do now is you'll give him a token, like a smiley face or a sticker, or I don't know what is meaningful. Just it's a visual depiction of something that's going to get him a reward later. It's not necessarily a rewarding thing itself. It's a token of a reward that represents a reward, like money. Why don't you give him money? He's 10 years old. Give him money. Give him a dollar bill every time he completes something. And then you still sit with him, but you gradually start to, you'll go out, come back in, go out, come back in, and you'll gradually start to increase the period of time you're gone. And you do it very slowly so that he's successful, he remains successful. If you do it too fast, he'll fail. So, and you'll still, and when he completes it within a certain time frame, make sure you time it, he gets the dollar bill. And so then you'll do this with another section of his homework and another section of his homework, and ultimately you want to make sure that every night he's not earning more than what's reasonable to you, let's say $5. And then he can spend the $5 however he wants. It'll be so motivating for him that he will not even care if you're there.
One of the most brilliant things I've ever heard was one of our BCBAs who said that they started when their child was young. I wished I'd thought of this back then, but their kids loved Kool-Aid. Now, I would tell you, based on what we said earlier about the artificial colors, don't do Kool-Aid, but find something that your kids particularly love, and you can do lemonade that doesn't have artificial food coloring flavoring in it, but they love, these kids loved Kool-Aid, and so the only time they served Kool-Aid was during homework. The only
that's a
time
great idea,
ever Kool-Aid, and every time homework was done, there was a thing of Kool-Aid that went on the table, and so they were like, is it time for homework?
That's right. That's a great idea.
Those are the children of a BCBA. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. In any case, but that I just put that in addition to what you say.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
Now at 10, it's a whole other thing. But
yes,
but for those of you with little ones, start now. Find what it is, and that snack goes on the table. We're out of time, and as evidenced by your alarm going off. In any case, we thank you so much for being here. It's my understanding that you are back here next week again. So I think that's super exciting. Make sure that you guys are writing in your questions for Dr. Granpeesheh now for next week. Thank you so much. We appreciate you more than you could ever know.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, it's time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Allspot Jackson will be joining me, and we've got a cavalcade of great guests. You're not going to want to miss it, so stick with us.